Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T. Lightheart from Awesome Health Podcast from Bioptimizers. And boy, oh boy, we are excited and delighted today because we have none other than Jonathan Goodman, who is the founder of the Personal Trainer Development Center and Online Trader Academy certification. He's authored 11 books, lived in 10 countries. He's originally from Toronto, just like me, has lived around the world, just like me, was a personal trainer, just like me, and wrote one of the most coolest books that I've actually been exposed to, which is called Viralnomics. In fact, I saw him at another friend's event a few years ago, Yuri Elkayem. For those of you who don't know, everybody knows Yuri, but the bottom line is Jonathan gave what I thought was the best talk and the best book, and circumstances have just conspired to have him join us on the podcast today. And it's so great to have him on here because for those who don't know, both Matt and I, the co-founders of Bioptimizers, we started as personal trainers. We started as nutritionists. And in fact, if it wasn't for Matt Gallant, my business partner, who came to me in 2004 and said that he was making money online in the fitness industry, and I looked at him and said, I don't even own a computer. You're crazy. No one's making money online. He didn't believe that I didn't have a computer because I was using internet cafes at that time. Long story short, we started a business, and that eventually, it's been 16 years later. And Jonathan is an expert in how you as a fitness professional takes your ordinary fitness business, your expertise and influence, and how do you capture an audience so that you have a steady stream of business, a steady stream of people coming in that can know you, find you in today's world. And this is a skill that every single personal trainer, fitness professional, and there's a lot out here listening to this podcast, needs to know. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And I mean, when I started on the internet, I actually, for the first 5 months, had checks sent to my parents' house because they didn't believe that it was possible to make money on the internet.
When was this? I gotta know.
This would have been late 2010, 2011.
Oh, wow. So I feel like an old veteran because I've been around this game since 04. And the funny part is I think I'm the only person in history that actually had a successful online business and didn't own a personal computer. So I don't know if there's anybody out there, but
interesting, isn't it? I mean, I started a blog without knowing what a blog was.
Right.
And it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, 10 years, right?
10 years. 10 years, people didn't know what blogs were.
That's true.
That's how much things have changed. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. One of the main advantages, of course, is back then was there wasn't as much competition. One of the main disadvantages is it was way harder to get started.
Oh, yeah.
I had to teach myself basic Photoshop. I had to teach myself how to code. I had to teach myself how do these words get on the internet? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, there were resources out there, but it wasn't thrust in your face. It wasn't particularly easy to figure out. To set up a website was thousands of dollars, and you had to maintain and code that website for the most part yourself getting started, which means you had to learn those things. Whereas now, you get a template website like for free or for like $10, and you could publish on the internet with your phone. You've got a better film studio, photo editor, like video editor than even the best video editors had back in 2010.
Right. So I got a million questions in around this. So let's give a little bit of background story just for people who might not be aware of you and what you're doing. So how did you move into this? Because I remember you talking about this at Yuri's event, and I was really interested in the story, but I want to get to the second part after, but I want the backstory because I think one of the things that really struck me is your insight around what goes viral, and also how does a person position themselves in the modern world based on everything. So can you share how you got started, how you went forward, and then what your guys are doing today?
Sure. I'll be really quick and succinct, and then you can dive into any part of it that you're interested in, that you think your listeners might be. I was a personal trainer. I worked the 6 a.m. I got up at 5, so tired that I thought that I was going to throw up. I'd train clients 6 until usually 9:30 p.m. with a couple hour break in the middle of the day where I'd try to do a workout, usually not. Sometimes I did. It was funny, I loved going to the gym until I worked there.
I used to squeeze the workouts in on the cancellation clients where they would cancel. I would do my workout then.
I would definitely do that. I would try to eat. I became really good at calorie dense foods to just get them in me as quick as I could. Cause I would do 9-10 clients in a row, like one-on-one clients in a row.
That's physically taxing.
Yes. But it was fine when I was 21, 22, 23 years old.
Right.
But by the time I was 23, I was doing pretty good. I was earning as much as you could earn basically in Toronto at the time. I was charging as much as you could, about $100 an hour per client, referring my overload of clients to other trainers, earning commission from that, and even managing a small group of trainers. It was about 10 of us doing some of the hiring, the onboarding, some of the continual development, earning a salary from that too at 23 years old. And I kind of got to that point where I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm kind of at the top of where you could get to in the fitness industry, right? The next stage is opening a gym. And for some reason, I always knew that I didn't want to do that. Not that it's a bad thing. It just wasn't for me. And I was like, is this what my life is going to be like? I didn't particularly like the answer because it didn't seem like there was much room for growth. And you don't get to a point like that if you're not growth oriented.
100%.
It was scary. And then the tipping point for me, the catalytic point was I played ice hockey, of course, because I'm Canadian and that's what we do. And I still played after university and everything like that. And I got tripped, pulled a hamstring, was 2 weeks off of my feet and didn't make money for 2 weeks. And that was the point where it was real for me, where I was like, this cannot be a viable career as it is.
Right.
Fine for me now. But if I have a family, because I want a family at some point, I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to take time off. I got to make money somehow other than personal training. I never wanted to leave personal training, but I started to dive deep. I studied residential real estate investing, right? I built 2 business plans for smoothie operations.
Right.
I was just looking for anything. And this was when, keep in mind, you couldn't just go on the internet and get the magic money formula fed to you 27 Facebook ads every single day. You had to look for it.
Yeah.
And so I would go to the bookstore and I'd look, through the business section of all the best-selling books on multiple streams of income. I'd write down the names of the authors and then I'd go across the street to the library and check them out. And I just basically read and came across something called infopreneuring, which now everybody's like, oh yeah, of course you can make your money selling information, but
right. Again, it was radical back then though. Nobody, like you said, no one, not only were very few people doing it, no one even believed it was possible.
It was an underground movement.
Yes.
There were telemarketers like Tony Robbins type, they were around, but it certainly wasn't in your face. Ain't nobody was proud to say that their son or daughter was an entrepreneur. It wasn't the glorification, sexification of entrepreneurship that I think has been largely shut down now that COVID has happened, had certainly not started. And selling information was just kind of this weird underground thing. People were doing it. And I later found Toronto was actually a bit of a hotbed for it, which was interesting, but I didn't know it at the time. Anyway, this all was contingent upon, basically, it was this diagram in one of these books called Multiple Streams of Income by Robert G. Allen, and it had the circle in the middle to denote the center of the universe. And then all around the outside were all of the income streams you could make from the center of the universe. And the center of the universe was write a book.
Yes.
And the idea of that image was, once you write a book, all of these things around it, you can basically build off of that, right? You can do partnerships, affiliate deals, you can rent your mail list, you can create other products, you can speak, you can do everything. And so the advice was write a book about what you know about. And I was like, I know about personal training. So I wrote about personal training. And at 24 years old, my first book came out called Ignite the Fire, The Secrets to Building a Successful Personal Training Career. And I was so ignorant. I self-published it. I was so ignorant around the whole process. And I think that's part of the lesson of my story is perhaps we know too much about things these days and it stops us from taking action.
I really think that's true.
So I knew so little. Like I had no qualms. I cold emailed everybody who I could think of. Like I would go to the bookstore and look at books, at fitness books, and I would cold email the authors and ask them who their editor was. That's how I found my editor. It was Brad Schoenfeld's editor. I didn't
Wow.
know Brad at the time. Now he's a friend, but like I didn't know him at the time, and he introduced me to his editor, and like everybody got back to me. And so anyway, so I self-published the book and published it through what was then CreateSpace, now is Amazon KDP. And that book has gone on. I mean, still, that book actually right now, as we're talking, is #1 in exercise and fitness on every major Amazon worldwide.
Amazing.
And this is what, 9 years after its release.
Wow, incredible.
It's in
That's
Chinese,
incredible.
it's in Spanish, it's used in certifications in India, mentorships in Norway, colleges across North America. Like all of it because I was just stupid enough and ignorant enough to not even think about why I shouldn't write the book.
You bring up something really funny because, Matt and I going from personal training to online education to eventually having a nutritional supplement company and still sticking with our roots, and why we bring people such as yourself in is to kind of stay on the cutting edge of the industry. And I think personal trainers are like the frontline soldiers today of that movement to kind of call back the tide of dysfunction, disease, and obesity and all that stuff. And we need more and more of them, and being relevant in that. But I always say we were either too stupid or too stubborn to quit in the early years, and eventually, despite ourselves, we ended up, ended up with a certain level of success. Was that the same for you, or did you just naturally have that knack or entrepreneurial flair that you just kind of went from one thing to the next and never really looked back?
I don't know. I have realized now that I'm gloriously unemployable. And
Me too.
yeah, and that was always the case, but it wasn't by virtue of my upbringing.
Same here.
I'm from a reasonably affluent Jewish family in the suburbs of Toronto. Every adult I ever knew was a lawyer, doctor, dentist, accountant, or teacher, or business person of some sort.
Wow.
My dad's a businessman. My mom's a teacher. I have 3 siblings. They're a lawyer, a teacher, and a businessman.
Right.
Right. And so every single one of my friends is a lawyer, doctor, dentist, teacher, accountant, or businessman. Every single one. And so I don't really know. I feel like it was natural, and I kind of went with it. I had a bit of success early on, but for some reason, I'm able to have this weird amount of pig-headed discipline and stubbornness. Mm-hmm. If I believe something is right and I think you're wrong, I'm just going to keep going.
Right.
And that's not really a positive attribute.
It depends. It depends. I mean, if you look at the people, that quote of, the unreasonable man quote, the only people that actually make a difference in the world is those who are actually unreasonable to those around them. Right. And so I think if we look at the Steve Jobs kind of mold, that they were unreasonable men. And if you look the autobiographies of very many successful entrepreneurs, they had that characteristic.
Yeah.
Now, I have another question, I think, which is relevant because it's stirring up my own journey as well, because there's a lot of parallels here. And one of the things that I noticed when I was personal training, because basically I was from a poor family in East Coast of Canada, got to the West Coast through my athletic career, had some, I looked a certain way. So that got me in the door past my marketing limitations. My marketing card was me, my physique, and then the ability to produce results. And that's how I built a business. And then Matt brought in this concept of you can actually market this through that, which just blew my mind. But having exposure to, say, a group of people that I would not normally have access to, people that you couldn't get an appointment with, who were then paying me to be their trainer and advisor, and eventually cultivating relationships. So I can think of the the 5 clients that were my bread and butter people in Vancouver are all today deep, close friends who are now what I would consider peers or advisors to my current business stuff. Was that something that you experienced well as a personal trainer, that influence that you might not have got had you tried a traditional career?
That is, by my estimation, that is the most underrated, most important aspect of a personal trainer. It's actually why I think that if you really want to be successful in whatever you do later on in life, you should be a personal trainer when you're young. Yes. Simply because how else do you ever, these are people who you couldn't even buy their time for any amount of money.
No.
And yet they're paying you to spend a lot of time with you. And I have lots of instances of that. It's also like a great networking tool. I mean, I have access to a lot of really powerful people because I know they're personal trainers. Because Correct. I have such a good network of personal trainers, I can get connected to like basically any celebrity or business icon. I shouldn't say any, but a lot of very major ones. And I mean, I don't like, you only got like so many bullets in the gun. I'm not going to go out and ask for these instructions, but if I need it. And so, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one very powerful example. I, like a lot of personal trainers, when I was younger, didn't think personal training was a career. It was just like, I was always going to go back to school. Like any good Jewish boy, I was going to be a doctor. And then when I was in school, I figured PhD in muscle physiology. I was really interested in how to potentially reduce or offset or decrease the decline in satellite cell atrophy in aging. Mm-hmm. And so I applied to master's programs, and I asked one of my clients, who was the Associate Dean of Medicine at the University of Toronto, how else do you get the Associate Dean of Medicine at the University of Toronto to spend 3 hours a week with you, one-on-one?
Exactly.
And so I asked him, I trained him for a number of years, and his wife and his daughter and his daughter's friend. And I asked him for a reference letter, and he said 100% happy to, as long as you can tell me why you want to do a PhD.
Wow.
And I said, and what's interesting is this was the first time I'd ever thought about it. And I said, because I want to write a book. And he just looked at me and he said, so write an effing book. And what I love about that story is the year that I would have finished my PhD, if I went all the way through, was the year my first book came out.
Wow. That's, and writing your first book, for people who haven't done that, is both a psychological and emotional journey, because you instantly know as soon as it comes out, number one, there's going to be things in the book that you're probably going to get away from later on. So or are going to be incorrect. Number two is it's inherently incomplete. And number three, you're taking a position out there, and anytime you take a position, someone's going to attack you, and you have to be able to manage those things, those first level of criticisms, which everybody's a troll nowadays, and everybody can't wait to throw arrows or stones at the guy in the ring that's doing their best armchair athleting it, as opposed to actually, there's objective critique with respect, and then there's just critique. And we've gone away from objective critique into just, cancel culture. And that wasn't necessarily the case when we started out, maybe, but
I had some nasty experiences.
I'm sure.
You know what it does when you put out a piece of work that you believe in, doesn't necessarily have to be a book, but something that you work on by yourself because of sheer belief, purpose, legacy, whatever you want to call it, that you put everything you have into and work when other people don't, when you should be sleeping, when you should be seeing friends or going out to the bar or whatever. And you do this for long enough, and then that piece of work comes out. It's this feeling of, man, I can accomplish anything.
Absolutely.
And getting that first book out, I have no fear now taking on projects, because I know I'm going to figure them out. And every project that I do, everything that I ship, whether it works or whether it doesn't work, gives me more and more courage to do the next one. And And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of trolls and people out there, but going back to like me not listening well to people, it's always been a problem. I've had to almost give myself a textbook education in empathy, which is a bit of a joke amongst our team, because I largely, like, especially for the people who are coaches who run our programs, we've got 13 different coaches, I think, who work in our various programs with our students, and 13, maybe 14. I think it's going to be 20 soon because we're bringing on 6 more. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I hire empaths. Right? That's
Right.
what you need to be a great coach. And so I've kind of taught myself that. And it's this idea of like, you need to listen to other people, but you first need to gauge their believability. You first need to gauge their intelligence. And I actually look forward to people I disagree with that I consider to be highly intelligent.
Here to that, I just want to say, acknowledge it, because I actively seek out opinions that conflict with my own, because I remember reading, I think it was Poor Charlie's Almanac or Warren Buffett. I forget which one it was, because they're kind of like synonymous between the two of them. And one of them said, I don't give myself the luxury of an opinion till I've considered its opposite. And in today's world, what I find interesting is like, as soon as I reach some kind of opposition, I either completely I'm not saying me per se, but what seems to be in vogue is I'm going to just viciously attack that person, or I'm going to ignore that person, or I'm going to project some sort of a discount or culture. And I think we're seeing it play out in the world today. And this is a very dark place, because number one, people are more fearful to take a position because of the conversation that's going to ensue. And number two, we're really, that's how you hone your presentation when you go against something that's pointing out some of the biases that you might have or things you haven't considered. And the idea is to refine that knowledge and information so that you can, better serve the mission. That's powerful. I don't want to take over here, but
no, I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I love those conversations. It's one of the things that I really, really enjoy is comedy. I listen to a lot of comedy. I study a lot of comedy. And if you ever listen to our podcast, the Online Trainer Show, you'll see it's like, it's a comedy podcast masked as a business development podcast.
Beautiful. That's the highest form of education, in my opinion.
It really is. And what I find fascinating and sad about comedy these days is how comics are treated. I mean, comedians are highly intelligent. Absolutely. Some of the most intelligent people. And comedy, the best comedy, are comments, are observations about the world, about society, about the weird stuff about society. And so comedians have to walk that line.
Yes.
Right? That is how they illuminate issues.
Yes.
Through comedy. They talk about issues, they bring up issues, talking points, they help you see things in different ways. Through comedy, that's one of the main ways. Through storytelling, comedians are great storytellers too. That's how we communicate. But they are handcuffed now because they can't test their material in the way that they used to be able to. For fear, like Kevin Hart's tweets from like 8 years ago came back, and the Oscar, he was going to host the Oscars, and he made tweets like 10 years prior, I don't remember the exact timeline, that somebody dug up, and the Academy told him that he had to publicly apologize for these tweets he made a decade ago, or else he couldn't host it. And he said, screw you, I'm not hosting.
Yeah.
That's how we get better. That's how we learn. That's how we test. And they can't do that. It's not that they necessarily mean these things. It's that they feel it's important to have some sort of a commentary on these things.
So true.
In doing that, it's a pendulum. Before you can figure out where that pendulum sits down in the middle, you're going to bounce it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and have a conversation about it and have a discourse about it. You can't even do that now, because the second you say anything, if it's considered off kilter,
yes, you're canceled.
you're done.
With devastating effects. And of course we live in, I think we've moved from and this is a segue into what you do, is we don't live in the information world. We live in the attention world. And how do you get attention to what it is that you're doing? And of course, I was fascinated when you had your talk at Uri's and I got your book Viralnomics and talking about that sort of thing. And going back to the comics side, the dark side of that was pretty well illustrated in the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, of how they first they took out the comics, because comics relieve the anxiety and tension of uncomfortable topics in a nuanced way so that we can re-examine ourselves and have a giggle and then, you know, maybe come home on the drive home with my wife. It's like, yeah, maybe we ought to talk about some of these relationship things now that we've kind of alleviated this.
Why did we find that funny?
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
was I offended by that?
Right. And those are both important spectrums to create this internal self-examination. As they say, the unexamined life is not a life worth living. And of course, in this kind of Facebook world where it's all about me, to project my message out, there's very little coming in other than a comparison analysis of how do I, you know, kind of usurp that. But let's talk about, because I could go down this all day long and I know you got a time thing. I want to talk about personal trainers out there. My favorite people in the whole world. They're in the gym, they're working the trenches, they're trying to offset the tide that is coming at us, which is widespread obesity, you know, health spans being crushed in North America. There's never been a time that's more important for personal trainers. I know that you help personal trainers get their message out, get their information out, brand themselves, promote themselves, and get the skill set needed in today's world to build a business. Can you talk about why you started that? What's the mission and how you're going about this, what I think is one of the most essential business? Because I'll tell you what, I would not be here today if it wasn't because of the partnership I had with Matt Gallant. I had no business being in the online world. I didn't own a computer. And over the last 15 plus years, he's always been the initiation as I've kind of brought my chops up a little bit by bit. And I don't profess that I'm an expert in these areas, but I've got a team of people that are expertise. Tell me how did you make that a business model? And of course, it's so important today. It's so important for a personal trainer to understand this today.
It is. I mean, we'll go back to me being blissfully ignorant. I like the word optimistically ignorant around business. A lot of businesses have a product or a service, and then they say, okay, I've got to build a marketing channel in order to promote this product or service, right? So they build a content platform or whatever it is. I was too stupid to do that. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I built a content platform having no idea what I was going to sell. And then I realized that it was probably a good idea, instead of trying to make up what the community wanted or needed, to just ask them. Right. So we did, back in 2012, we collected over 1 million data points. I did 150 one-on-one phone calls with our community.
Wow.
And I basically, my goal was
this a boards community or a social media community? What was it back then?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we had a growing Facebook page. We had a growing email list. We've been putting content out for a while. The Personal Trainer Development Center blog was always collaborative. I mean, we have over 1,000 articles on there now. At that point, I don't know how many people were going to the website, 20, 30,000 a year. Now we're getting a few million a year, but you know, enough that we had, and it was early adopters who found us, because it was all organic, the growth. So it was a very stable foundational growth. It was good people that found us. And so I was able to drill down the problem into one sentence by the end of all of this work, which is personal trainers that want to succeed in their career need to figure out a way to make a bit more money in a bit less time with a bit better schedule.
Beautiful.
That's literally it. If we can figure out how to solve this problem, almost all of the nonsense in the fitness industry actually goes away.
So true. Because
personal trainers are the connectors. And so if they can't, if they're in this kind of abusive business dictating fitness business model where where there's all of these constraints around how they offer their service. They're trading their time for money. There's all of these things where they're kind of kicked around a fair bit. And they're still not offering people really good service because a perfect workout is never 60 minutes long. Exactly. A perfect workout doesn't start at 6 p.m. on the dot. You know, our job as trainers is to reduce stress in our clients' lives, not add to it, not give them another appointment that starts at a specific time. Like the associate dean of medicine at a major hospital in one of the biggest cities in the world doesn't need to be told by a 21-year-old that he's late and he's losing 10 minutes of his workout because of it. You know, he's
so
probably
true.
got an important.
I always found that so interesting.
Late.
I always found that so interesting. I'd be sitting there with the titan of industry, and I've got a, you know, they're 15 minutes late because they were making a $1 billion decision or something.
Right. Or like saving somebody's life, and you're like, oh, sorry, you didn't give me 24 hours cancellation.
Yes.
You know, I'm charging you $80 or whatever it is. So it's, you know, it's ridiculous. And then a lot of the schemes where people are selling stuff they shouldn't be selling, you know, scammy 6-pack workouts, scammy supplements, like all of the stuff. A lot of that nonsense would go away, because really all that it is when you drill it down is just trainers trying to figure out a way to do what they do, right, and make it work for their life. And so anyway, so back in 2012, we were basically like, okay, now we got the problem, right? What's the solution? And in one of those surveys, I still have it screenshotted. I think it was number 60, survey response number 64, mentioned online training. I never thought about online training before. I didn't even know it existed. Looking back now, I know some people who were doing it back then, back in 2012. I know some people doing it in like 2007, but it was literally like they wrote an article for T-Nation. This is all of the stories of people doing it like back in like 2010. They wrote an article for T-Nation. Somebody emailed them saying, hey, can you write me a workout? I'll pay you. And they were like, sure. Send me a check in the mail. So they'd send them a check in the mail, and then they would email them an Excel template.
I remember those days well.
That's
my first experience was my original bodybuilding coach was Scott Abel, and was a well-known name in the bodybuilding industry. And I hired him at that time for some nominal fee. It seemed like extraordinary amounts for me, sort of the expertise. And that was exactly it. I had to give him post-dated checks, and he would email his workouts back and forth online.
Amazing,
and then when I got to meet him, he was actually the reason I got into the personal training business, because I remember coming to Toronto and he was living in this gated vertical community like I'd never seen before, in a condo, and he had a great life and he had all these things. And I was like, wow, you can make a living out of this industry, and a pretty darn good one.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. And
all of those post-dated checks.
Yeah. And a year later, that's exactly what I was doing. So how has that changed today? And what's the upside and the ease, or what are you teaching people to make that transition? Because there's a lot of people that are getting certifications, let's say, as a personal trainer, but okay, you know how to tell them how to do a bench press and a pull down or whatever it happens to be, maybe. And then that's not the business skills to kind of develop consistent clientele coming in, offering them what I call a world-class service and process, and then retaining those clients and creating a system of, you know, a feeder system. Is that what you're kind of doing?
Particularly online, you've got to be a different level communicator.
Correct.
It's very, very different, not just the selling and the marketing, but how you take care of the client. Even how you assess the client is completely different online. I mean, getting ahead of ourselves, but like assessments in person, you kind of want to be as valid as possible. Assessments online, even though most assessments in person aren't very valid anyway, that's just a whole nother conversation. But like particularly body fat assessments in gyms are pretty much, for the most part, not even worth the scale that they're on or whatever it is. Like bioelectrical impedance is just not accurate, which is what most of them are based on. But online, you want to flip the gears. You have to favor reliability over validity, because you can't expect your client to have valid assessment tools. And so you have to choose different types of assessments and check in with them and monitor their progress differently, understanding that as long as your assessment is going to be valid, reliable from assessment to assessment to assessment to assessment, how valid they actually are, because you can't really be sure of that, matters much less. So it kind of flips. So you've got to kind of think about it differently in how you train the person. Right. Continuing on the story. So back in 2012, so we figured out that was a problem. So I built a business model from scratch, how to build an online training business. I literally sat down. I think I was living in Hawaii at the time. And I sat down and I on a piece of paper, wrote down a business model, and I beta tested it with 24 people just of our audience. It was just hey, $200, whoever wants to basically test this, I have an idea. 22 finished it. Some good, some not so good. Took in all of the results, basically rejigged the business model and turned it into a course, which at that point was called 1K Extra. Was the first ever course teaching how to be an online fitness trainer. Came out in September 2013. And that course, I think there was something like 500 people who signed up for that day one. And over the years, it's just a matter of we've helped over 30,000 people in 87 countries now at online training.
Crazy.
And we've done 8 variations. The textbook is in version 3. We evolved it into the first ever certification in 2016. Now we're in version 3 of the textbook. And it's new. Right. And we have such a massive information. Everybody's running to online training now because of COVID. We're we've been doing this for 7.5 years with 30. We don't need to guess what works. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. We know the pitfalls. We know what to avoid. And so it's been pretty cool to see how it's evolved. And one of the major things I think that is really important to know is social media comes and goes. Techniques, tactics come and go. You can always try to jump on whatever the trend is, or whatever the fad is. But the fad's going to come and go. And if you jump on it, you may be able to catch it right at the right time. You may be able to ride that wave a little bit. But it's going to fall off, and then you're going to have to start new. And after 1 or 2 or 3 cycles of that, your audience isn't going to care, because you're going to keep telling them to follow you in different places and look at different things. You're never going to get particularly good at one type of media, at one type of business model, because you're always going to be jumping to different things, and you'll never have built your foundation. We've learned that this is the whole crux of Vironomics. Buttons change, people don't.
Correct.
Why people exercise, why people interact with media, why people spread messages, talk to others, recommend services, why people buy services. It doesn't change. So you got to learn that first. You've got to really maximize that and get great at that. And that's what we teach people. And then, of course, comes down to the actual training of the clients, what's interesting about the fitness industry is that the training of the clients, the workout that you give them, is actually secondary to the psychology.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
Funny you should say that. One of the things I used to say to my clients when they would come in to see me was, I said, you know what, we're going to get you in shape. That's the only thing that's going to require that is adherence to the program that we're going to develop and cultivate, and the time frame that you're going to have to stay consistent to get to your goals. That's easy. I said, the part that you're really going to pay me for is to figure out what you think that you're going to gain from achieving this ideal physiology that you've acquired? Whether that you think you're going to be more attractive, do you feel you're going to be more confident, do you feel you're going to be healthier, whatever that unconscious payoff that you're willing to shell out your money is, that's the piece I'm most interested in, and is probably why I have still great relationships with those many of my best clients today.
That's what matters.
Yeah,
that's what matters, and that's what gets people real results too, and lasting results too. I mean, get somebody an overnight result. What are you going to do next week?
Well, it's like the biggest loser syndrome. If you look at what's happening, these people who have been successful in that, and that the rebound effect that's been going on, because again, maybe the motivation is too much of an externalization as opposed to truly an internal recognition. And if you don't address that subconscious aspect, you default to the old program.
And that's kind of the same. It's funny because it's kind of the same phenomenon in business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the biggest gainer, it's relatively easy for any trainer who has any kind of a history of getting results with clients to pick up a few, you know, like a reasonable amount, like 10 to 20 initial online training clients that pay the money, that they're like, oh my God, you know, you see all these ads. It's like, oh, I made $5,000 in my first 3 weeks, or like somebody's promoting. They're like, I can help you make $5,000, whatever. The issue is, what do you do next? We know from, if you're using paid advertising, right, the people closest to you are going to be relatively cheap to obtain. Scaling outside of people who know who you are becomes much more expensive. Mm-hmm. The same thing with organic client acquisition. It's relatively easy, with the littlest bit of marketing knowledge and understanding how to make a compelling offer, to basically ask in the right way and take out the low-hanging fruit. The problem is that, and so it seems like everybody's moving so fast and getting all these results, but if you actually look at like all of these testimonials, they all talk about what happened in the first month. None of them happened in the first year. You know, like I do something in a community group where I'll like interview some of our students and stuff like that. And it's like, no, for the last 4 months, he's been consistent at 30 or 40,000 a month, right? COVID hit and he lost all of the income from his gym. And then the next month he did twice as much with his online. And then he maintained that for 3 months. That's what matters. But a lot of the time what happens is people have like that quick hit in revenue, similar as like Biggest Loser, and they spend it, or that becomes their new normal. Mm-hmm. And then they can't maintain that. And then they've taken all these expenses, and then it hits them almost harder. It's like this weird kind of rebound effect with business gain, the same type of like physique gain, right?
So ironic. I remember listening to Ty Lopez, who's a big influencer, and he says one of his business mentors told him, the worst thing that could possibly happen to you is that you make $1 million before your age of 30. And he said, because you might not be able to handle, like you might be able to think, I've got this figured out, right. and there's so much more that you don't know. And I think most of us who have had a certain level of success early on in our careers have also oftentimes gone through some sort of collapse about what we don't know. And if we stuck around in that industry, we fought through our ignorance that we got shut down on, and then it ended up into becoming a more robust business model. Would you say that's true?
I'm thinking back how old I was. I was close to 30 and 100%. I think it was a couple years younger. I think it was 28, 29. But it was one of those, I have. And I did gain a false confidence. You know, I hit on something early on, largely out of luck. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of skill involved, but like largely out of luck. And I believed that I was better than I was. I believed that I was immune, and I took my foot off the gas.
Right. Yes.
And I'm always fascinated by stories and like seemingly inconsequential like asides that stick with you, because I think that those have a lot of lessons. So Kevin Hart did this Netflix special, basically like cameras followed around him his life. And I don't know, I watched like 2 episodes. It was episode 1 or 2. And it was his personal trainer who was talking about Kevin's work ethic and everything like that. And he's just like, one thing, our job is to keep pushing Kevin because he's at the top right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're at the top, you don't settle down. You got to work harder because when you're at the top, everybody's coming to get you. It's not a time to take it. And I took my foot off, quite honestly. There have certainly been some downs where we missed opportunity because I was just my ego got high, and I'm lucky because I don't particularly like spending money. I don't really, like I have a $20 Casio watch that I love showing off because it's just the best watch. I don't particularly like expensive things. Probably because I grew up and money was never really that big of an issue. It's never been a goal of mine, which I, readily admit. I think if I'd been through different adversity, it might have been different. But I had been able to put a bunch of money in the bank early on. That gave me an opportunity then when things maybe didn't go good. We started to get into the red for the first time ever. It's like, all right, we got some space to figure this out now. We don't have to be reactive. I think the worst position you could ever be in business is a position whereby you're reactive and you are forced to make decisions that are short-term, that go against your personal values and morals because you got to make ends meet this month. That's the beginning.
That is a terrible position. And I think a lot of people paint themselves into that corner unknowingly and make false assumptions. And that's oftentimes the first big obstacle that happens as an entrepreneur. You get too high on your early success and, eventually those seasons change. And all of a sudden the guys that navigate the winter part of their business and survive it, or the girls as well, like they're the ones that become the balanced and long-term business entrepreneur. Related to, I know you can't
let yourself get taken out of the game.
Correct.
That's the best piece of advice. It's like, no matter what, don't ever make a decision that if it goes horribly wrong, you're taken out of the game. Yes. It is simply not worth that risk. And so when you're looking at risk tolerance, to me, that's the guide. You can take risks. You can make bets. You should make educated bets, but you can make bets. But never make a bet that's going to take you out of the game if it doesn't go well, which means never invest in like a really expensive, in our business, like a really expensive coaching program that you put on 3 credit cards. I don't believe that pressure will make you work harder. I believe that that's risk that you should not be taking. If it goes well, great. But if it doesn't go well, you're finished.
Yes.
And that's not okay.
I know you're on a tight schedule. Can you talk about specifically what the Personal Trainer Development Center's mission is, what your goal is? How do you help people, and how do you take people from, hey, I want to be a personal trainer and get into this field, and really turn them into an active professional in today's world, and what that takes?
For sure. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people who become personal trainers because it's kind of like a fun thing to do. They like fitness. They don't quite know what they want to do with their careers. And it's also a new industry. How many retired personal trainers do you know? Mm-hmm. It's a young industry. And for whatever reason, a lot of people who enter in the fitness industry start as personal trainers, and it's not yet clear enough. The path hasn't been illuminated enough on a public scale, and this is a lot of what we try to do, that you don't have to be a personal trainer for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. In fact, many of you won't. And that doesn't mean you have to leave the fitness industry.
Right.
The fitness industry needs project managers. The fitness industry needs administrative assistants. The fitness industry needs data analysis experts, website developers, coders, salespeople, every skill set you could possibly imagine. That if you're passionate about fitness and health, we help you move along your career. We take you from even before you become a trainer, help you figure out how to find the right job, get the right certification, get yourself set up the right way, and then move along those steps of your career to wherever you want to be. And in some cases, it's actually outside of the fitness industry. which is perhaps most interesting. You know, we've got the Online Trainer Academy certification, and largely what that does is it helps trainers who are perhaps overworked find the freedom to make a choice of what their next steps are. Maybe that's have a little bit of income so they can still work in the gym. Maybe that's they want to travel more, volunteer more. Maybe that's that this fitness thing should really be a side hobby, because a lot of people who, and you know, I kind of made a joke. It's like I used to love going to the gym before I started working there. That's kind of the reality for a lot of people, that once a passion becomes a job, it ceases to become a passion. So a lot of trainers become trainers because it's a passion, and then it becomes a job. And they're like, don't really want my livelihood and my family's livelihood to depend on this. And so what we do with OTAs, we kind of help people figure that out, right? By giving them a bit of space, a bit of financial freedom, really, and also time freedom. You know, you'll still kind of be trading time for money, but at least you're doing it on your own schedule. And some people, we kind of base it on like, we're going to help you make your first $1,000 extra a month with online training. That's our guarantee. Within 90 days, if you're not doing that, we'll give you your money back. But some people are like, yo, I'm good. $1,000 extra a month. I'm happy. Just keep training my clients, give away those 2 I don't like. I'm good. Other people say, all right, now it's time to blow this up. And then we've got level 2 of our program, right? Then they can scale. Those are the people who are doing 40, 50, 60,000 a month, and they're just going up and up and up and up and up. And then other people are like, you know, now that I have some space to think about this, I'm going to keep training these people online. The extra income's fun. It keeps my foot in it. You know, these are people that I can do endurance races with, whatever. But actually, I think I'm going to change careers. I think I'm going to go back to school. I think I'm going to become a nurse, become a physiotherapist, become a real estate agent, right? And so we help people find that we help people figure out what the steps are and navigate those steps of their career, because unfortunately, the fitness industry is largely guided by for-profit, independent companies that are fractured, that don't speak to one another. Those are most of the certifying bodies. And their profit model is contingent upon them not letting you out of their reach to keep buying courses and programs for them.
Right.
And staying a trainer. And what we do is we kind of established ourselves, and we're like, yeah, we're Switzerland. We'll talk to anybody. We're worldwide. We don't care whether you're CrossFit, a bodybuilder, whether you do Zumba, whether you're Orange Theory. It doesn't matter. Everything works. Everything's for different people. Doesn't matter whether you're in Australia, the United States, Dubai, right? Nairobi, doesn't matter. Whatever it is, like will help you take that next step, based off of best practices, based off of what is actually out there. And if we're a part of that, great. And if we're not a part of that, awesome.
Beautifully said. I know you got to go, so I'd love to continue this conversation because it's so nuanced and there's so many levels to it, and your experience as an entrepreneur moving through all levels of this industry, and what you're saying is how that can be a trajectory into these other careers, I think is really phenomenal. Where can people reach you, find out more about your company, get inside this? I would highly suggest and recommend it to anybody that listens there, knows somebody that is a personal trainer or as a personal trainer or someone considering that field, to get exposed to your thought. I think your thought leadership is, and everybody's talking about thought leaders, but I instantly recognized that a number of years ago when I saw you and read your Viralomics books. I was just mega impressed, and even more so that we get to a direct conversation. Where they get a hold of you, how do they find out more, and all that sort of stuff.
That's super kind. That's super, super kind to hear. If you like podcasts, we've got a podcast called The Online Trainer Show. It's education, it's comedy, it's fun, it's silly. We talk about poop. So if you're offended by that kind of thing, don't listen. But if you think it's funny like I do, then definitely listen, and you'll learn some stuff about business. So that's onlinetrainer.com/podcast. If you're interested in online training, online personal training, if you're a nutrition coach, personal trainer, gym owner, and you want to know how to do that the right way, Online Trainer Academy. That's our certification. It's also mentorship if you opt for the mentorship. And that's onlinetrainer.com/academy.
Beautiful. Thanks for joining us today on the Awesome Health Podcast. Again, the Personal Trainer Development Center. Jonathan, I love chatting with you. I hope I can get back to you again and maybe with a little bit more time, because I'd like to get into some more of these nuanced conversations. I think it's really important that we start sharing these things in the online ways, and this sort of cancel culture craziness that's kind of emerged, and getting into real topics and real things that have nuance. Buy one of his books if you're not a personal trainer. I really like Viralonomics. I think it was one of the best books I've read in the last 5 years, in my opinion. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Wade.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.